Kamala's audience squirms as she yaks about pachyderms. Our video of the day comes to us from the former VP who made her first major speech last night since Trump took office. And it was another classic ball of verbal vomit.
Kamala Harris just got scorched so badly, NASA's probably recalibrating their satellites to track the smoke trail. And who lit the fuse? None other than Greg Gutfeld. If you thought late-night TV flatlined, Gutfeld just slapped it back to life, only to use it as a launchpad to rocket Kamala's approval ratings into deep space in reverse. From cringeworthy cackles to verbal gymnastics that even Cirque du Soleil would reject, this roast spiraled fast and messy. Picture a toddler with spaghetti, but the sauce is political fire. This isn't just a monologue. It's a full-blown roast session with the intensity of performance art. Wielding a flamethrower, buckle up, the real carnage begins now.
She is referencing a viral video of elephants. Watch.
Who saw that video from a couple of weeks ago? The one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake? And as soon as they felt the earth shaking beneath their feet, they got in a circle and stood next to each other to protect the most vulnerable. Think about it. What a powerful metaphor.
Yeah. It's almost like they built a wall.
So Kamala Harris took the stage at yet another public speaking event, and somewhere between the podium and her point, logic must have taken an extended vacation. Circa 2020, it's less of a speech and more of a freestyle entry into the national word salad games, where clarity is optional and coherence is on sabbatical. Just as the audience begins bracing for another foggy journey through half-finished thoughts and eyebrow-raising phrases, in strides Greg Gutfeld, armed with wit sharper than a sushi chef's blade and absolutely zero tolerance for gibberish in designer heels. Let's just say the roast wasn't just served, it was flambéed.
Kamala Harris has created her own scented candle. And just like her, it gets lit every night. She's a drunk.
Kamala seems to have suddenly remembered that we actually have a border. For she's announced she's going to the border. True, after 4 years of denying there's a border crisis, what's changed? Why the 180? Do you suppose it's the polls?
Let's be honest. This speech was supposed to be presidential, uplifting, energizing, the kind of address that rallies a room and echoes with purpose. Instead, it morphed into a baffling display of verbal gymnastics, like someone trying to juggle metaphors blindfolded on a unicycle. At one point, the audience wasn't taking notes. They were checking their Wi-Fi, half convinced that buffering symbol had leaped off their screens and into real life. Then comes Gutfeld, perched like a man watching a political satire unfold in real time, only to realize it's not a sketch, it's the main event. And he's brought popcorn.
Kamala Harris will visit the southern border on Friday. She said she's looking forward to finally meeting Justin Trudeau. Speaking of Harris, at the last debate, she said she was a middle-class kid. However, it appears Harris enjoyed things most middle-class kids didn't, like living abroad, private school, at some of the wealthiest places on earth. The only thing she didn't enjoy was a nanny, unlike her husband.
Greg didn't need a script, no teleprompter, no prep team in his ear. All he needed was Kamala being, well, peak Kamala. A medley of recycled buzzwords, vague hopefulness, and spiritual fluff practically handed him the punchlines on a silver platter. It was less of a speech and more of a motivational poster generator gone rogue. Greg took one glance at her delivery and turned it into an impromptu comedy set, except the real punchline was just how seriously the former vice president seemed to expect anyone to take it.
To mention, Trump is the wall candidate, not Cackle's McKnee pads. Stern got even more pathetic, wondering how she doesn't nap.
When you said you don't nap, I get it, because like what you've taken on is extraordinarily difficult. And I mean, do you feel the pressure of the moment in the sense that, like when I met you out in the hall, I said, I'm really nervous because I want this to go well for you. I want it to go well for the country.
Hold on. I need a minute.
This wasn't commentary, it was a full-blown demolition. Gutfeld didn't just critique her speech. He went at it like a cardiac surgeon who swapped his scalpel for a chainsaw. Every awkward pause became comedic gold. Every overused cliché, a ready-made punchline. Watching him react was like watching a roast master handed a script so flimsy, it practically begged to be shredded. The speech was so void of substance, it made elevator music sound rebellious. Her pauses didn't emphasize meaning. They felt like unplanned intermissions. Her metaphors, like riddles written by a motivational poster factory stuck in a power outage. And the expressions, oh the expressions. Gutfeld's face turned into a live-action emoji board. Eyebrows doing Olympic-level flips, smirks buffering like a glitchy app, and that unmistakable look of a man silently wondering, did I leave the oven on? While trapped in a TED talk hosted by a fridge magnet. But the absurdity didn't stop at the delivery. It was the boldness behind it. She spoke about equity like it was a word she just found inside a fortune cookie, then shifted into describing America's future with the sweeping drama of someone narrating a Windows XP screensaver. Meanwhile, Gutfeld, stoic, savage, surgical, was breaking it all down with the quiet intensity of someone who once lost a bar bet and had to endure a 4-hour TV talk marathon titled Finding Meaning in Meaninglessness.
Maybe they can circle around your husband, Doug, to protect vulnerable nannies. But Kamala brought that long-winded story in for a landing with this poignant lesson.
Because we know those who try to incite fear are most effective when they divide and conquer, when they separate the herd, when they try to make everyone think they are alone. But in the face of crisis, the lesson is don't scatter.
So powerful. But wouldn't it be more powerful with bongos?
Because we know those who try to incite fear are most effective.
The man didn't even blink. While the media was off swooning, clutching their pearls and fawning over how inspiring Kamala's speech was, Greg Gutfeld stood dead center, wearing the smirk of someone watching open auditions for the next season of Veep. With every metaphor she tossed out, bridges to nowhere, dreams wrapped in buzzwords, futures described like interpretive dance, Gutfeld looked like a man being forced to translate GPS directions written in slam poetry. You could almost hear his internal monologue. Wait. She said that, out loud, in front of actual adults. Then came the unraveling. Gutfeld didn't just roll his eyes, he built an entire trampoline of sarcasm and bounced over each talking point like he was moonwalking through a field of narrative landmines. While Kamala showered the room with inspirational one-liners like it was a ticker tape parade of vague promises, Greg pulled out the industrial-strength vacuum of logic and sucked every glitter-coated phrase straight off the carpet. It wasn't a critique, it was a full-blown comedy roast, dressed in a three-piece suit and holding a master's degree in reality. She brought sound bites, he brought sound judgment. She came armed with slogans that circled back on themselves like a motivational loop-de-loop, and he countered with cold, clear commentary that cut through the fluff like a buzzsaw through bubble wrap. By the end, the audience wasn't sure whether to laugh, cry, or quietly Google what on earth she'd actually meant. And Greg? He just kept calmly hosing down the spectacle like he was hosting a telethon for lost political coherence. But it wasn't just the speech. No, that would have been too easy. Gutfeld went deeper. He peeled back the entire Kamala Harris persona like a neatly wrapped gift on Christmas morning, only to find socks and a brochure of vague promises inside. The signature cackle, the head tilt, the hand gestures that look like she's sculpting invisible clay into a policy plan, nothing escaped his lens. And the best part? He didn't miss a single beat. In one particularly glorious segment, he compared her public appearances to interpretive mime acts, only with less silence and far more nervous laughter. It wasn't cruel, it was calculated. The roast equivalent of a Michelin star meal, meticulously prepared, expertly timed, and served with just the right amount of flair. Because here's the thing, even if you don't actively dislike Kamala Harris, you've probably felt it. That strange lag when she speaks, like your brain's running Windows 95. There's a moment of buffering, the spinning wheel of confusion, and then, bam, you're mentally rebooting mid-sentence. Gutfeld doesn't invent that feeling. He simply holds up a mirror to it and says, "You're not crazy. That did just happen." What sets him apart is the way he elevates the absurdity. He doesn't just point out the gas, he turns them into mini productions, crafting entire 3-act plays around moments most commentators would gloss over. He paints the scene so vividly, you can practically hear the teleprompter gasping for air in the background as Kamala attempts to conjugate hope into something that resembles a coherent plan.
I want to point out something Jessica said, that Trump began as a millionaire and now he's a billionaire. I think that makes him an expert in this. I would rather listen to somebody who began as a millionaire and is now a billionaire than somebody who doesn't have a damn clue about economics. I've never heard a candidate today more unsure of themselves on a topic than Kamala Harris. I think she's been burdened by the weight of expectations put on her by the media. I've never seen a better campaign ad for Trump. She's campaigning better for Trump than Trump.
He weaves together facial expressions, scrambled metaphors, and the oddly over-rehearsed enthusiasm like a jigsaw puzzle made of wet noodles. Wobbly, chaotic, and somehow still hilarious. Not because it's cruel, but because it's so painfully precise. Every moment Gutfeld highlights feels like déjà vu for anyone who's ever sat through a Kamala Harris interview wondering, did I zone out, or did she actually never finish that thought? And yet, he makes the whole experience feel like comedy therapy for a country that's been collectively stuck buffering. He wasn't alone, either. Millions tuned in, not to analyze policy, not to dive into political theory, but to finally witness someone say the quiet part out loud, that Kamala Harris gives speeches like she's trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions. And Gutfeld. He's the guy holding up the mystery Allen key, smirking, "I think you missed a step." What makes it so sharp is that it wasn't laced with rage or drenched in partisanship. This was observational comedy dressed up in political relevance. Think George Carlin in a blazer with a notepad full of C-SPAN timestamps. And Kamala, bless her, delivered the source material like a contestant on Whose Line Is It Anyway? Executive edition, where every answer is made up and the clarity doesn't matter. But Gutfeld didn't stop at punchlines. He went full CSI, Veep edition. He broke down her pauses like a film critic dissecting an obscure foreign art film, zooming in on those moments when her eyes seemed to be silently begging the sentence gods to help just one line land.
What about Kamala? Well, just like the corpse, it's now okay to talk about how terrible the clown was, too. Because before, it would have been career suicide to spill the beans and commit an act of actual journalism. Ripping on Kamala now is about as risky as wearing leather chaps to a pride parade. Right, Dr. Drew?
He zoomed in on the audience's confusion, the puzzled glances, the polite chuckles that came a beat too late, the subtle head tilts that screamed, "Is it me, or did that sentence just collapse on itself?" People weren't engaged. They were checking their phones like they were waiting for a fire drill to rescue them. And it was glorious. Then came the Twitter takedown. Gutfeld dove into her feed, a beautifully chaotic archive of motivational vagueness and syntactic acrobatics. One tweet read like it was generated by a ChatGPT model trained exclusively on Pinterest mantras and horoscope affirmations. Gutfeld read it aloud like a bedtime story for politically exhausted adults. Somewhere in D.C., a PR intern probably cried into a branded reusable water bottle. But what truly pushed the roast into masterpiece territory was that Gutfeld didn't just mock Kamala, he contextualized her. He painted her as the living symbol of an administration so thirsty for energy, they handed the mic to someone who makes public speaking feel like a full-contact sport. His sarcasm didn't stem from meanness, it bubbled up from sheer, jaw-dropping disbelief. The kind you feel when someone looks you in the eye and says, he didn't rant, he didn't yell. He stared into the camera, blinked slowly, and let the absurdity speak for itself. And somehow, that silence was funnier than any scripted punchline. Naturally, outrage followed. The pearl clutchers emerged on cue, wagging fingers and gasping about how Gutfeld was undermining the dignity of public office. As if Kamala hadn't already done that by explaining democracy with the same tone you'd use to describe Mercury in retrograde during hot yoga.
It's very important, as you have heard from so many incredible leaders, for us at every moment in time, and certainly this one, to see the moment in time in which we exist and are present, and to be able to contextualize it, to understand where we exist in the history and in the moment as it relates not only to the past but the future.
You know, that's some bad weed. Generally, when people get high, they actually have some interesting thoughts. Not her.
Meanwhile, the rest of us were just relieved. Relieved that someone finally said it. Someone finally admitted what we were all thinking, that listening to Kamala speak is like stumbling into a TED talk that accidentally merged with a high school poetry slam. Her public appearances feel less like presidential leadership and more like an improv class gone rogue, armed with buzzword flashcards and nervous energy. And Gutfeld. He turned that collective cringe into an art form. He took our national secondhand embarrassment and sculpted it into a perfectly timed, razor-sharp satire. It wasn't mean, it was masterful. A highlight reel of rhetorical confusion delivered with a smirk, a raised eyebrow, and the finesse of someone who knows exactly where the line is and how to tap dance on it. The truth is, Kamala isn't difficult to parody because she's political, she's difficult to parody because the parody writes itself. Greg just showed up with a megaphone and said what everyone else was too polite or too nervous to say, that sometimes modern leadership feels like watching someone try to juggle abstract ideas blindfolded, inside a wind tunnel. He didn't pretend it was profound. He didn't dress it up in fake reverence. He stripped away the scripted sheen and revealed the off-key musical playing underneath, where style flails to replace substance. Somewhere in his montage of viral moments, Gutfeld even rolled out Kamala's greatest hits, the fake French accent, the circular definitions, the nervous laughter that sounds like it's coming from a haunted talking doll. He didn't need to stretch the truth. Reality had already done the heavy lifting. All he had to do was point.
Paranoid about her public behavior, they held a fake party ahead of a DC dinner in 2022. Her aides even considered serving wine so she could practice with a glass or two, but decided not to. Good call. The only time Kamala stops after 2 glasses is when she switches to chugging Listerine.
That's what made it genius. Gutfeld wasn't inventing comedy, he was harvesting it. Like a man strolling through a golden field of political wheat, casually plucking soundbites, bloopers, and baffling quotes, then turning them into gourmet-grade snark. Kamala's greatest verbal hits from the past year, half-sentences, scrambled metaphors, motivational catchphrases that vanished mid-air, suddenly became puzzle pieces in his bigger, bolder mosaic. And that mosaic, a masterpiece titled, How Did We Get Here? Even the way he ended the segment was a stroke of comedic elegance. No dramatic mic drop, no thundering outrage, just a shrug, a knowing smirk, and the unspoken message that we'd all just witnessed something strange, surreal, and maybe a little historic, a kind of political Bigfoot sighting. Only Bigfoot would probably have delivered the speech with more clarity. By the end, it didn't even feel like a political takedown. It felt more like group therapy for every American who's ever watched a Kamala Harris speech and thought, wait, did I just black out or did that actually not make sense? Gutfeld gave shape to that confusion. He sculpted it, framed it, and then set it ablaze, roasting marshmallows over the wreckage while we all laughed along. And here's the twist. He did it without venom. Snarky? Absolutely, but not cruel. Because to be mean, you'd have to hate your subject. And Gutfeld doesn't hate Kamala, he's just completely, endlessly bewildered by her. It's like watching a man walk into a 5-star restaurant, only to be served a carefully plated bowl of air. And now he's trying to write a Yelp review without sounding completely unhinged. That's Gutfeld, navigating Kamala Harris's speeches with equal parts disbelief and deadpan humor. So where does that leave us? With Kamala still fumbling metaphors like a tipsy magician at a children's birthday party, pulling out scarves of symbolism no one asked for, and vanishing logic right before our eyes. Meanwhile, Gutfeld stands on the sidelines, popcorn in hand. But this wasn't just a roast. Gutfeld conducted a full-blown symphony of satire, using her own sound bites as sheet music. Each pause, each awkward phrase became another instrument in his orchestra of bewilderment. And as long as Kamala keeps composing these verbal Rube Goldberg machines, you can bet Gutfeld will be right there, grinning, unfazed, and turning every misplaced word into comedy gold. Because if there's anything funnier than a Kamala speech, it's watching Greg Gutfeld survive one. Sarcasm charged, sanity barely intact, and still somehow making sense of the senseless. And honestly, someone's got to do it.